Hello everyone, my name is Hip. I am your friendly neighborhood killer main, and I'd like to discuss lore. Specifically, lore accurate builds for every single licensed killer in Dead by Daylight. This is something I've been working on for some time, and I figured I'd make it my first proper video on this channel. Now you may be asking, why don't I do all the killers? Well, I'm more familiar with the licensed killers and their lore, and while I do have some lore for the original killers, I don't have lore for all of them. Plus, there are over 40 of them, so that would just be a much longer video, but if this is received well, I might do a part 2. Anyways, without further ado, we will start with the shape. For Michael Myers, we have Iron Grasp, play with your food, otherwise known as see how they run. Enduring, and save the best for last, otherwise known as keep them waiting. We start with who, in my opinion, is the single most important license in Dead by Daylight's history. Michael, as depicted in the Halloween 1979 movie, which this iteration originates from, stalks his prey, waiting patiently, inhumanly so, for the right moment to strike. Iron Grasp was chosen to represent his inhuman strength. In the first film, he pins someone to a wall with a kitchen knife, breaks a car window with a strike of his palm, and moves an entire tombstone without anyone noticing. Play with your food, otherwise known as see how they run, represents his patience in stalking Lori, watching from afar and yet always right behind her. He enjoys, well, playing with his food, giving them time to marinate in their dread. Same logic applies for save the best for last, aka keep them waiting. He picks up her friends with a surgical proficiency, anyone within her proximity becoming a casualty. And finally, enduring for his sheer relentless durability. He gets stabbed in the neck, the eye, and shot 6 times out of a balcony and still gets back up. And later that night, if Halloween 2 is to be taken as canon, shot furthermore in the eyes and blown up and still survives. Point is, he just keeps coming, and I think enduring represents that very well. Now, let's move a bit further south for a good old-fashioned Texas barbecue. The Cannibal, otherwise known as Bubba Sawyer, or Jed Sawyer, or Thomas Sawyer, or Bubba Slaughter. He's had a lot of names over the years, but you probably know him best as Leatherface. For Leatherface, we've selected the perks Fire Up, Iron Grasp, Distressing, and Enduring. Ultimately, no matter the iteration, Leatherface is closer to a wild animal driven by fear and instinct than a man. Whether out of fear of strangers, fear for or of his family, or the entity itself he now serves, Leatherface is a monster devoid of empathy, caring only for making his masters proud. Which is why Fire Up fits him so well. As his prey gets closer to escape, he grows agitated, more aggressive, more desperate, his fear of failure making him even more dangerous than before. He also possesses immense strength, able to run with a fully revved up chainsaw at one point and carry an adult woman, kicking and screaming down to the lair for processing in the 1976 original. Enduring represents his sheer relentlessness. He'll stop at nothing to catch his victims and place them on a meat hook in the cellar. This is demonstrated when he saws through the front door of his family home and chases Sally for a solid 5 minutes with a chainsaw, the iconic climax. Distressing is rather simple. I mean, chainsaws aren't exactly made for a stealth approach, are they? Now, let's move on to a different kind of nightmare. The Nightmare, otherwise known as Freddy Krueger. For Freddy, we have Hex Bloodfavor, Hex Devour Hope, Distressing, and Play with Your Food. Admittedly, Freddy was a bit tricky for 2 reasons. Firstly, we have far more to work with in regards to the original Krueger, played by Robert Englund, than we do his 2010 counterpart, who is featured in the game. Secondly, his overall power level is so nerfed in Dead by Daylight, it's a kind of a hopeless process to try to copy it. So I tried meet in the middle, using traits both iterations have in common to make a build. Freddy, be it the Jackie Earle Haley or Robert Englund version, is a sadist. He loves taunting his prey, giving them just enough hope they may make it out of their nightmare alive, only to rip it away. He also has a massive ego, flaunting his absolute power over his prey within the dream world. Bloodfavor serves to emulate the survivor's lack of options. In the dream world, Freddy is God, and you can't escape. This is as close as I could figure. Other options could include Bamboozle, Thrilling Tremors, Deadlock, pretty much anything where the entity blocks off survivor objectives or escape routes. Next is Devour Hope, which plays a similar role to Bloodfavor, preying on his victims' altruism in trying to save each other, only for him to rip it away, such as him sparing Nancy long enough that she'd fall into a comatose state when she inevitably fell asleep in her 2010 movie. Play with Your Food also fulfills that purpose, and Distressing represents the level of showmanship he shows within the dream world. He wants you to know he's coming, such as with his iconic nursery rhyme. Insert soundbite here. Moving on to a killer with a love of all kinds of games, we have The Pig. For Amanda Young, we have selected No Way Out, Make Your Choice, Haywire, and Dead Man's Switch. So Amanda's key trait is the fact that her games are always rigged to be completely unwinnable, which goes against the philosophy of John Kramer, Mr. I've never killed anybody Kramer. I try my best to replicate this, at least to the best of my ability, using these perks, because admittedly Saw was never a franchise I enjoyed. I could be wrong on these, so feel free to comment. Anyways, No Way Out and Haywire are pretty self-explanatory. She tampers with the exit to make them much harder to open. Dead Man's Switch punishes survivors for leaving generators to save teammates from hooks. And finally, just Make Your Choice. While not the best perk, is beautifully thematic for the license of Saw. It's a survivor essentially sacrificing their own safety for that of another, something I believe Jigsaw would approve of, and by extension, Amanda. Even though she still tried to kill both, as she believed no one would be worthy of his gift. Speaking of killers who plan ahead, let's move on to the Ghostface, otherwise known as Danny Johnson or Jed Olson. For Ghostface we have Dissolution, Haywire, Hubris, and Hex crowd control. So Ghostface is unique due to him technically being an original, so going over his lore extensively, here's what I came up with. Firstly, Ghosty is what Pixelbush once eloquently referred to as a murder nerd. He studies his prey extensively, learning their routines, their homes, everything about them, so he can perfectly predict their movements and ultimately stage the perfect murder. Dissolution, Haywire, and crowd control all represent him preparing for the trial, cutting off possible survivor escape routes, tampering with exit gates and pallets. That's what I'm going for with Dissolution. As for Hubris, that's from his tome lore. He was furious that a satirical newspaper mocked his work, and even more so when he heard the teens who wrote it talking about trying to outdo or take credit for it. He drops to planning, killing all of them that very minute, and did so rather sloppily. Hubris represents him going for the kill much faster off of the survivor disrespecting him. Now, from 90s nostalgia, we move to the 80s with the Demogorgon. For Demogorgon, everyone's favorite interdimensional predator, we have A Nurse's Calling, Surge, Alien Instinct, and Distressing. Demogorgons are all pretty simple. It's extra sensitive blood, being able to smell it, for lack of a better term, from the Upside Down into Hawkins. Nurse's Calling and Alien Instinct both reveal injured survivor auras, so this seemed like a natural pick. Distressing and Surge have very similar reasons to one another, as its arrival always interfered with electronic equipment in Season 1 Stranger Things, causing lights to flicker and stuff like that. It's been years since I watched Season 1, so please forgive me on that. Anyways, not a lot to say. Demo is simply a pupper after all, but speaking of monsters from another world, we move on to the Executioner, otherwise known as Pyramid Head. For Pyramid Head, we have Trail of Torment, Forced Penance, Furtive Chase, and Make Your Choice. Pyramid Head was tricky, as he's not so much a killer as a tormentor. Trail of Torment actually serves his role in his source material quite well. He leads James down the road to his own redemption or damnation, this perk mimicking that by showing auras of generators to survivors at the risk of them finding you there. Forced Penance represents Pyramid Head's multiple murders of Maria, cutting her down for a game between James and Pyramid Head's ultimate purpose. Furtive Chase and Make Your Choice punish altruism and saving others from their own punishments, a mirror to the selfishness of James Sunderland, who was ultimately deserving of his own punishment. At least, that was my thought process. But moving on from Silent Hill into Raccoon City, as we have a different kind of pursuer in the Nemesis. For Nemesis, we have Fire Up, Enduring, Lethal Pursuer, and Friends Till the End. From an extremely complex character to a rather simple one, Nemesis' sole purpose was the utter extermination of his targets. He always seemed to know where Jill was, shrugged off any and all punishment, and mutated to compensate for any damage taken. Fire Up represents mutations. With each and every obstacle to the mission, he gets stronger, steamrolling through any obstacles between him and Jill. Enduring represents how little anything thrown at him seems to do. Bullets, rockets, grenades, and acid meant to destroy him at a genetic level, nothing seemed to put him down. Lethal Pursuer and Friends to the End help him acquire his target's position and move on to the next after he completes his mission. Now the next killer offers nothing more than the most splendid pleasure imaginable. No tea, the Cenobite. For Pinhead, otherwise known as Elliot Spencer or the Hell Priest or lead Cenobite, we have Distressing, Surge, Sloppy Butcher, and Fire Up. Pinhead is an interesting character, as he isn't close to your standard slasher, and as he has very limited screen time in the first movie. The villain in the original Hellraiser is technically Frank Cotton. So, for reasons similar to Demogorgon, our first two picks were Distressing and Surge. In the original movie, and most of the sequels in fact, there's a lot of fanfare whenever Pinhead and the gang make their appearance. Bells chime, lights flicker, walls bleed, TVs bleed. They don't really do subtle that's what I'm getting at. Distressing and Surge reference that perfectly, having the presence of Pinhead fucking up generators and Distressing letting you know that Cenobites have come. As for Sloppy Butcher and Fire Up, well, Sloppy Butcher is kind of self-explanatory. When if Pinhead and his friends do their thing, it's usually very bloody, very gory afterwards. And Fire Up, Cenobites don't really like people escaping them, so I'll be real, that was just, I couldn't think of a fourth perk, so I just kind of went with Fire Up based off of them saying no one escapes us and stuff like that. Anyway, moving on to from someone who tortures your soul to a tortured soul, we have the Onryo. For Sadako Yamamura, we have Surge, Forced Penance, Mindbreaker, and Deathbound. Similar to Pinhead, she's not really your standard slasher. Unlike Pinhead, however, we have a lot to work with in terms of a lore build. First up is Surge, representing her general relationship technology. Simple, honestly. Next up is a pair of perks that work with each other for the same reasons. Forced Penance and Deathbound. Sadako punishes anyone who tries to stop her curse without spreading it. It's not canon, but in Sadako vs. Kayako, for example, a crossover film with The Grudge, by the way, Sadako murders an entire team of priests and an exorcist for attempting to exorcise her curse from someone. And Mindbreaker represents the oppressive dread her curse inflicts. She makes a singular appearance post-death in the original Ringu, but her appearance is felt constantly throughout the film. Now, from 7 days to 7 minutes, we move on to the Mastermind, otherwise known as Albert Wesker. For Wesker, we have Brutal Strength, Superior Anatomy, Lightborn, and Starstruck. Wesker was the pinnacle of Umbrella's BOW research, and he loved to flaunt that over anybody he was up against. He could tear through obstacles like paper, knock steel doors off their hinges, throw grown men around like toys. Brutal Strength seemed appropriate for that, which lets him just be merely inconvenienced by your attempts to defend against his onslaught. Superior Anatomy is him, like, saying, hey, anything you can do, I can do better. Starstruck lets him cut down anyone in the way of his progress, and Lightborn because sunglasses. Not a whole lot to Wesker, honestly. Now, from the depths of Umbrella to the depths of space, our next killer's structural perfection is matched only by its hostility. The Xenomorph. Now, full disclosure, I am a Prestige 100 Xenomorph main, so that out of the way. For the Xenomorph, my beloved, we have Forever Entwined, Strider, Bloodhound, and Alien Instinct. The Xenomorph is an apex predator, able to track and kill prey with brutal efficiency, a perfect organism. Firstly, we have Strider and Bloodhound, mimicking the enhanced senses of the Xenomorphs seen in the original Alien. It stalked the halls of the Nostromo, picking off each member of the crew one by one, and never seemingly helpless to stop it, even with a home court advantage. It's also deceptively intelligent, able to track and ambush the crew with little trouble, even though the environment was one they were familiar with. That's where Alien Instinct comes in. It shows the aura of the farthest injured survivor, marks them as oblivious, allowing for ambushes. And Forever Entwined represents its general efficiency. It tended to waste little time killing anything in their way or taking them back to the nest for, you know, chest bursting. Now, moving from space to the toy aisle, we have the Good Guy, also known as Charles Lee Ray or Chucky to his friends. For Chucky, we have Insidious, Hysteria, Hex, No One Escapes Death, and Dark Arrogance. Chucky loves to toy with his prey. Nope, no pun intended. He enjoys hiding in plain sight as a harmless toy, only moving when no one's looking, and Insidious replicates that pretty well. It takes away your heartbeat when you stand still, so yeah, there's that. Hysteria plays off his habit of hiding in the environment even when his victims are already hurt. They can hear him but not see him. He likes playing head games. Hysteria removes the heartbeat for whenever he injures someone, but only from that survivor's perspective. It applies oblivious, in other words. Noed is there for his ties to Damballa and voodoo in general. It would have felt off if he didn't have some sort of hex. It also helps highlight the sheer psychotic bloodlust he has, and he drops any shred of a facade of a harmless doll if his victims get too close to escape. And Dark Arrogance is there for two reasons. Firstly, he's quick, and second, he's small. Pallets should stun him a little longer than your standard killer. Now, from dolls to the tabletop, we have the Lich, otherwise known as Vecna, the true Vecna. For Vecna, we have Unforeseen, Spies from the Shadows, Hex Plaything, Merciless Storm. From a perspective of lore, Vecna is probably the most powerful killer in the Fog. Depending on writer, he's either a godlike arch-lich or an outright god. As such, I felt he deserved a build representing the sheer power he has with his magic, as well as a small homage to his source material. Spies from the Shadows has him using the crows as his eyes, letting him see where people are. Merciless Storm is him impeding survivor progress by summoning the entity block-off generators, testing survivors' concentration with an endless sea of skill checks. An Unforeseen Hex Plaything is for him lurking the shadows, plotting his next move, and misdirecting anyone who would oppose him from his true goals. The next license to join the cast was similar in power and had a thirst for blood. The Dark Lord, otherwise known as Vlad Tepes III or Dracula. For Dracula, we have A Nurse's Calling, Hubris, Bloodhound, and Starstruck. Bloodhound and A Nurse's Calling need little explanation for a vampire. Of course, they will be a little extra sensitive to the smell of blood. Starstruck and Hubris are him cutting down any and all who dare oppose him in his crusade against humanity. They represent the danger posed by even attempting to stop him and his endless hatred for mankind. Anyone who dares stand against the Dark Lord will know his wrath. Now, from a blood drinker to a flesh eater, we have the Ghoul. For Ken Kaneki, we have Rapid Brutality, Alien Instinct, Bloodhound, and save the best for last. Kaneki, as he is in the Fog, has been driven mad by the endless hunger he has as a ghoul, after being pushed to the brink already by endless torture at the hands of Jason, and the entity heightening his hunger to near starvation. Bloodhound, Alien Instinct, and Rapid Brutality all represent the virality in his head, as he's extra sensitive to blood and flesh as he tries to get his next meal. Save the best for last is him trying to eat as quickly as possible so he can move on to his next course. Truthfully, Kaneki's very simple personality-wise in-game, because he's a little more than a feral animal. If he's a bit more accurate to the anti-heroic character seen in the manga or anime, I probably have more to go on. So we'll just move on from eating flesh to eating pizza with the animatronic. For William Afton, aka Purple Guy, aka Springtrap, aka the man behind the slaughter, we have Iron Grasp, No Way Out, Trail of Torment, and Spirit Fury. Now, I know quite a bit of FNAF lore, specifically on Afton, but his build is fairly basic for reasoning purposes. Iron Grasp and Spirit Fury are for that metal coffin that used to be an animatronic that his corpse is buried in. His hands are gone, replaced with the robotic endoskeleton's hands over his own. Spirit Fury is as close as I can get to Pal's being broken over his animatronic body. So yeah, that's pretty much it for those two. Now, in life, William Afton was a master roboticist. In No Way Out is him tampering with the exit gates. Think of it like if the generators are the first 5 nights, think of this as the sixth. It also represents his catchphrase of
I always come back.
Finally, Trail of Torment represents his method of killing. He lures his prey to the back area of the restaurant, isolating and then killing them. Also, the undetectable status effect works well for his jump scares. Now we move from a child killer to a guy who can't seem to kill a group of children, and our final killer, Vecna, aka The First, aka Henry Creel, or as I like to call him, Hank. For Hank, we have Surge, Trail of Torment, Forced Penance, and Friends Till the End. For the record, I never finished his debut season, nor have I watched the final season, so I have a limited frame of reference. That said, I think this build works pretty well for him. Surge for its general interference with electronics, like every resident of the Upside Down. Trail of Torment and Friends Till the End for its isolation and torment of his victims before going for the kill, and Expose from Friends worked for that really well. And Force Penance for his hatred of those who interfere with his plans. His specific hatred for Eleven, for instance, comes to mind. And that'll about do it for me. If this does well, I might do a part 2 of the original killers. There are over 42 killers in the game. While I don't play them all, I'm proficient with most of them. I also apologize for the awkwardness. This is my first time doing a video of any kind, really. But until next time, this is your friendly neighborhood killer main, bidding you goodbye and happy hunting.